Hi, I'm David Arena. I am here with Marianne Hardart, co-author of The Automat, The History, Recipes, and Allure of Horn and Hardart's masterpiece. Marianne, thanks for joining me today to talk about The Automat.
My pleasure. Hi, I'm Marianne Hardart. I am the great granddaughter of the co founder of the Horn and Hardart Automat, Frank Hardart. I co authored the book on the Automat with Lorraine Diehl and am an Automat enthusiast forever.
From your perspective, what made Horn and Hardart so special, and what really set it apart from the other restaurants throughout that time?
Maybe the three things that come to mind as the most important things in no particular order, but one was the commissary. In Philadelphia and New York, there were commissaries where not 100% of the food was prepared, but most of the food was prepared. So it was being prepared in a central location and then trucked out to the restaurants. So for quality control, that was really helpful. And for freshness. And then there was also a tasting table where the executives would taste any new recipes, seasonal recipes, or anything if anyone complained about anything. And I don't think anyone else did that at that time and or since. I mean, it's when you think about the mechanism of our how we get our food now, it's hard to imagine that even being possible, but it was very important to them. So the overall quality control measures were intense and systematic. And then I think the other thing that the co-founders, Frank Hardart and Joe Horn, had in common was a passion for the quality of the food and the experience that people had when they came to the restaurants. That was as important to them. And it wasn't just about serving people a good meal, it was making people have a full experience in their restaurants. And that went on behind the scenes too. So many people I met who worked there talked about how you felt that family feeling and the way they took care of people and treated people within the business as well. And I think that definitely came out in the way people felt when they went to the restaurants.
Yeah, that definitely comes across in the messages even that we get from people about memories and history. And that was a pretty prominent theme in the Automat documentary as well from Lisa Hurwitz. That sense of family really did resonate throughout the years at Horn and Hardart.
Yeah.
When you were writing this book, what were some of the most surprising discoveries that you made about the Automat and its impact on sort of American culture throughout the years, especially those 1930s, 40s, 50s?
Well, to be honest, there was so much I didn't know going into that book. So I often say to people who want me to speak about it that I had to do as much research as someone who wasn't in the family, which, uh, might not be so romantic in terms of, a harder writing about a family business, but um, I had to learn a lot. And I think one of the things that surprised me most, which isn't such a specific fact about the restaurant, but was, over the course of my life, I had so many encounters with people who said, "Oh, I remember going to the Automat as a child with my whoever, my parents or my grandmother or an aunt," or, the beginnings of the stories were so similar. And I was a little worried that I wasn't going to be able to find enough stories for a book because the beginnings all sounded the same. But what I learned in interviewing people and meeting with people when we were working on the book was the stories might start off the same, but then no two stories were the same.
So we're asked all the time about H&H recipes, and how did you determine what recipes to include in the book?
Well, some of it was availability, to be honest with you. We couldn't find recipes for every favorite that people would mention. So we did our best to find what we could. There's one in there for chocolate chip cookies that I make all the time and people love them. They're made with shortening instead of butter. I don't know if that's the key, but people love them. I don't remember anyone ever telling me that they remember Horn and Hardart chocolate chip cookies, but that they're from a recipe sheet. So some of the recipes were already broken down into normal sized recipes, and some of them were actually off of industry, like restaurant recipe sheets. And so I worked with a nutritionist. I had a friend who was a nutritionist, and she broke down the recipes and tested them. So she cooked them several times on the same stove. And so we did that with all of them, even the ones that were already broken down. We tested everything. And so the picking of them it was a combination of what was available to us and what we had heard that people loved.
Right. And you kind of answered my next question, which was related to the quantities, that most of these recipes are in huge commercial size quantities because they were cooking millions of pounds of baked beans and things like that every day. And so taking those recipes and putting them into a consumer sized recipe must have been very difficult.
Yeah.
My last question is really based on why you and I are both here, which is we both want to see this legacy of Horn and Hardart continue for the next generation. The book is such a big piece of that. This is so special that we have this book as sort of a reference for the history of Horn and Hardart. And it's one of those things that we think is just so important as we're trying to revive the company and the Automat in general. And so what would the revival of an actual Automat mean to you? And what would you think about bringing that back for the next generation?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, thank you. I feel so grateful also that, to have that book and the documentary. So many people over the years, sometimes in telling of the stories, which I'm sure you get to, have said, bring it back. Why don't you bring it back? Why don't you bring it back?
Yeah.
And I've had many people over the years who have made it come to me saying, we're going to, and here's what we're doing and trying and whatever. And there's been a part of me that has felt that, it had its time and its time has passed. But I actually, and especially after talking to you, I don't feel that way at all. I feel like, okay, it's not going to be exactly what it was in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, but it's not meant to be that. And I do think that what it stood for is needed today more than ever. Taking the philosophies and what we've been talking about in terms of the respect that they had for their customers, for the bricks and mortar, for the people who worked there, and for each other. And that's not gone.
Right.
And we need more of that. And I know that you have all kinds of ideas and have thought about this very carefully in terms of, what makes sense and, how to do that in a way that's actually sustainable and can succeed. And I'm excited about it. I'll be there.
Marianne, thank you so much for everything. And thanks for just taking some brief moments to answer some questions about the book. I love talking to you about this, of course, because I love everything Automat and Horn and Hardart related, but it is just so cool to have you here talking about these memories and this book.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
To celebrate the revival efforts, Marianne has graciously given Horn and Hardart 50 original copies of the Automat book to sell on Automat Day, June 9th, 2024. That is, of course, the anniversary of the first Automat opening. Sales open up at hornandhardart.com at noon Eastern Time. If you miss out on one of those 50 copies, we will open up a waitlist so that you can register for future reproductions.